Welcome, welcome. It is Monday, September the 29th. This is Hurricane Hub Live. I'm Chief Meteorologist Tim Pandages, and we've got a lot to talk about out there in the Southwest Atlantic, and that's the focal point of all the tropical activity out in the entire Atlantic Basin. So tonight on HHL, we'll focus on Humberto, which this weekend did peak as a Category 5, our second of the season, matched the peak intensity of Aaron of 160 miles per hour. Now it's still a major hurricane, but back down to a Category 4. But dual storms in the Southwest Atlantic. Humberto is out there paired with Imelda, pretty close proximity to one another. And it will spare the U.S. in regard to direct landfall, which is great news because when they're in that part of the basin, it's pretty hard to avoid landfall, but both will. But fringe effects are still expected on the southeast coast. In fact, the entire eastern seaboard will see those fringe effects in regard to high surf, heavy surf, rough waves, rip current risk, that sort of deal, coastal erosion. But both will be heading out to sea and doing that recurve out into the open Atlantic. So average storm dates, we saw the development of Imelda yesterday, our 9th named storm on September the 28th. Compared with last year, number 9 came around September the 25th. And with climatology on average, just right around September the 16th. So a little bit behind schedule, but not too far away from where we did it last year, and we'll see if we get a 10th named storm out there. There's nothing else brewing aside from what we've got out there with Imelda and Humberto. Now, Humberto became our third major hurricane. Gabrielle was also a Category 4, and that was our second. And October the 28th is typically, if we do get a third major hurricane, when that occurs. So we achieved that over a month ahead of climatology out there. So even though we only have 9 named storms, we've had 3 hurricanes and possibly going to be 4, with Imelda forecast to strengthen to become a Category 1 or 2 in the next couple of days. But look at where the energy is all focused, right in the Southwest Atlantic, getting a little bit crowded there with Category 4 Humberto off to the east, south, and southwest pretty much of Bermuda at this time. And then Imelda, that's now building north out of the Bahamas and pretty much just straddling the east coast of Florida. And again, this will stay offshore. Now, looking at this at face value, and you didn't know the track, you'd say, the U.S. may be in some trouble here, looking at the possibility of some landfalls with storms nearby. But both of these, and with their proximity to one another, are actually going to help to steer them out to sea. Let's start off with Humberto. Again, 140-mile-per-hour winds keeps it in the mid-range of a Category 4. Again, it did peak at 160 miles per hour this weekend, and still looking decent on satellite imagery. It doesn't have a clearly defined eye anymore, and it's obviously the impact of what's going on just to the west of there with the influence of Imelda, and both of them are having influences on each other's storm structure overall. It's a little bit of wind shear getting introduced to the mix here, but still hanging on to that Category 4 status. And you see there is Bermuda to the north. They do have tropical storm watches up, but this is forecast to track on by to the west of there and then head to the north and east as it heads north of the island. We turn things over now to look at it on visible satellite imagery here, and the imagery should pop up here in just a moment or so, but there it is. If we go back in time and look at it today when the sun was up and we had the visible satellite imagery visible, you can see there was an eye there visible, and then it had the central dense overcast that kind of clouded up over it. And it is building off towards the north-northwest at a decent clip at around 13 miles per hour or so, and still looking good in terms of ventilation, properly built vertically, so it is ventilating properly. But it does look like it is starting to ingest a little bit of some dry air. You can see that on its far western side here, maybe getting pulled into the overall circulation. And then again, back off to the west there is Imelda. Now, when it was at its peak, Category 5, it was moving over some very warm, very deep ocean waters, and this is very similar, tracked just a little farther to the north and east than where we saw Aaron track by, and that was also similarly warm and deep water that helped to propel it into some rapid intensification. We saw Humberto go from a Cat 1 to a Cat 5 in a relatively short amount of time, and we saw similar rapid intensification with Aaron and even Gabrielle, which was our third major hurricane of the season. Forecast track builds it to the north and then loops around pretty much Bermuda, which is good news. They will still be on the dirty side of things, so still likely going to see some rough waves and some gusty winds and some heavy rain, but at least it won't be a direct landfall on Bermuda. And for comparison, here's how it looks with Aaron's track. Aaron's track in the red, so this is almost just displaced a little farther to the north and east. Aaron was tracking much closer to the Leeward Islands and portions of the Caribbean, but it did again, avoid landfall, much like we do expect with Humberto here, and then doing that recurve on out to sea. All right, let's now build it over to Tropical Storm Imelda. Now, this has been slowly strengthening as it's been lifting slowly out of the Bahamas. It's only moving at 9 miles per hour out of the north still. We're waiting for that north to northeast turn here, which is expected in the short term. We're now sitting at 65 mile per hour winds. It's a medium to high grade tropical storm. Remember, once you hit 75 miles per hour, you're going to be a Category 1 hurricane, and it is expected to get there. Looking at it on satellite imagery, again, if you're on the east coast of Florida, today was a pretty decent day. Had some sunshine out there. The cloud deck is staying just offshore, but where it is expanding significantly is off to the north. I mean, part of this is from a stalled out boundary, but that tropical moisture is running up along it and then spreading out. We've got the cloud shield extending all the way up into portions of southern New England. Of course, it's over the Carolinas, but there's not a ton of rain, at least making it inland, which is good news, because you remember when we talked on Friday, that was the big concern, was for flooding rainfall if we were to see this build inland and stall, which was what was forecast just a couple days ago, and then started to be more and more influenced by high pressure to the north, and of course with Humberto off to the east there, that's giving it a little bit of a tug farther out to sea. We still have tropical storm warnings off for the northern portion of the Bahamas. Conditions there should be improving here in the short term, again, as it's lifting to the north and away from there. Here's the forecast track on Imelda, again, up to a Category 1 hurricane expected by tomorrow, but it's not done strengthening there. Even though it's going to pick up speed moving east, it'll become likely a Category 2 storm, right now maxing out at 100 mile per hour winds. But notice there is Bermuda there, so we'll likely see impacts, maybe more direct impacts from Imelda as it builds in that direction, probably Wednesday night into early Thursday, before that too builds out into the open Atlantic and not impacting anybody else. So Bermuda will see impacts likely from both Humberto and Imelda. Now, the eastern seaboard will still see those fringe impacts, and we'll talk a little bit more in depth about those. But these same spaghetti plots, when we last talked on Friday, were showing a due north, and then there's a camp that was off to the west and inland, showing a landfall scenario, and then there were a handful more that were going in this general direction here, and we see that now all models are showing the exact same thing, so there's no more misunderstanding or disagreement, I guess you could say, with the computer models here. Very much in line, showing a due east headed towards Bermuda and then out into the open Atlantic in the next couple of days. Now, with both of these storms here, you'd think that the seas would be ripping high with some big waves. And they are very, very rough, certainly. But if you remember Aaron, when we looked at these buoy wave heights, they were clocking waves like 35 to 40 feet where Aaron was. And that was pretty much right around this buoy here. But we see Humberto not too far away from it. 11-foot waves clocked at a buoy just off to the east of there. And then we've got a few off to the north of Imelda, that are showing 10-foot waves or so. And there will be some very choppy, rough seas for the next several days. And you see the model forecast height here are to show 7, 8, 9, 10, 11-foot waves for a pretty long duration of time, pretty much from now right on through the middle of the week, as both storms will slowly make their way off to the east and northeast. We showed the same map during Aaron, and they were showing 10, 15, 20-foot waves off the coast of the Outer Banks, down towards Wilmington, and even off the Virginia coastline. So indirect impacts are not expected to be as bad as they were with Aaron, that again tracks similarly. But rip current risk is up and down the entire eastern seaboard. We'll start down here in Florida with high rip current risk anticipated for tomorrow up through Georgia and the Carolinas, and even extending all the way up into Virginia and even parts of Maryland up to Delaware and southern New Jersey as well. The wind field overall directly from Imelda will stay offshore. But with that energy building north and along this boundary, we will have a very pronounced wind field stretching out longer. It won't be tropical storm force winds like you're seeing in the yellow here, but there'll still likely be very breezy to even gusty conditions along the Carolina coastline and up through Virginia tomorrow and right up through Wednesday as well. And as this gets a little bit farther out to sea, we'll start to see those winds come down a little bit. So the bottom line here is Humberto is creating very rough surf up and down the east coast, and that'll be paired with Imelda over the next 24 hours as it continues to strengthen. Now, more direct impacts to Bermuda from Imelda and Humberto later on this week. And all in all, could have been a very bad situation if landfall had occurred with Imelda. like we had talked about last week, with the stalling and slowdown of Imelda that was forecast that could have caused feet of rain, which thankfully we will not be seeing in the Carolinas from this particular storm. Now, in the Eastern Pacific, after quieting down after Narda fell apart about a couple days ago, it's back to seeing activity growing in the East Pac, and it has been a blockbuster season out there. We are now up to 14 named storms, and we could have potentially 2 or 3 others. We've got 3 different areas of interest, one with a low chance, one with a moderate chance, and one with a high chance of developing here. And the next name on the list is Octave, and then Priscilla right after that. If we do get those 2, that would be number 15 and number 16 on the East Pac name list so far. Now, we can update our scorecard based on the 2 basins here with the development of Imelda. So now we have 9 named storms in the Atlantic, 3 hurricanes, all 3 became majors. Imelda is forecast to become our 4th hurricane here, so we may update that again tomorrow. Compare with the East Pac at 14 named storms, 8 hurricanes, and only 3 of those have been majors so far. All right, that's the latest on the tropics. After a quick break, we'll join you back here. We'll see you in a couple minutes. Well, states along the southeast coast often see more direct hits when it comes to tropical storms and hurricanes, but that's not the case for the Mid-Atlantic. Meteorologist Taylor Stephenson explains why in tonight's Hurricane Fast Fact.
When a hurricane moves ashore, the intersection of the storm center with the coastline is the landfall. If you check out the landfalls from 1851 to 2023, you'll quickly see that Maryland and Delaware have each been hit directly twice. Florida and Texas are the states that have taken the most direct hits from hurricanes. North Carolina has had many landfalls, and New York has been hit several times too. So why the break for the Mid-Atlantic? Geographically, the Mid-Atlantic region is concave. In order for a hurricane to make landfall here, it needs to move northwest or westward. Now, the winds aloft that steer hurricanes typically blow from the west or the southwest across our region. But if those winds are weak or high pressure in the Atlantic is to our north or northeast, look out. That was the case back in 2003 when Hurricane Isabel came in over Ocracoke, North Carolina. We took a hard hit, but the storm could have easily moved farther north along the Outer Banks, or worse yet, coming over Virginia Beach or at the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay. Had that happened, the region might be vastly different than it is today. And just because we haven't had a direct hit recently doesn't mean it can't happen. For 13 News Now, I'm meteorologist Taylor Stephenson.
Well, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, also known as NOAA, is advancing atmospheric research, including the ways in which hurricane hunters collect critical data. WCNC meteorologist Becca Birdsall explains how they get their research and the upgrades to come.
Hurricane hunters fly into a tropical system. They don't just rely on radar and satellite data. They drop tiny weather labs called drop sondes straight into the storm. A drop sonde is a small tube-shaped instrument attached to a parachute. As it falls from the aircraft, it beams back real-time data multiple times per second, creating a vertical X-ray of the atmosphere from flight level down to the ocean surface. Each drop sonde measures pressure, temperature, humidity, and wind speed and direction. This high-resolution data provides insight into the storm structure from the eye to the outer bands. These profiles are fed directly into forecast models and analysis at the National Hurricane Center, making them one of the most important tools for predicting a hurricane's track and intensity. Now a new tool is being tested, the mini sonde. Mini sondes work the same way as traditional drop sondes, but they're smaller, lighter, and feature a more reliable deployment system. Standard drop sondes use a ribbon mechanism to release the parachute, which occasionally fails and leads to a fast, erratic drop. Mini sondes instead use a magnetic release that springs open the cap, ensuring the parachute deploys properly almost every time. NOAA is also upgrading its aircraft to support these compact sensors. While each instrument is expendable and only used once, the data they provide is critical, helping forecasters issue more accurate warnings that ultimately save lives. From the Weather Impact Team, I'm meteorologist Becca Birdsall.
Well, that's all for tonight's episode of Hurricane Hub Live. Remember, we are here 7 nights a week at 8 p.m. for the latest on the tropics. We'll see you back here Tuesday night.